The rain hammered against the abandoned warehouse windows as Sarah Chen pressed herself against the cold concrete wall. Her breathing was controlled, silent, despite the chaos that had unfolded over the past 6 hours. The Special Forces operator had been tracking a human trafficking ring for 3 months, following leads that had taken her from the bustling streets of Bangkok to this desolate industrial district on the outskirts of the city. What she hadn't expected was walking into a trap. The intelligence had seemed solid. Her contact, a nervous informant named Marcus, had provided detailed information about a shipment arriving tonight. Young women from rural villages, destined for wealthy buyers across Southeast Asia. Sarah had seen enough of these operations to know that time was critical. Every hour delayed meant more lives destroyed. She had entered the warehouse complex alone, as she often did. Her military training had taught her that sometimes a single operative could accomplish what an entire team couldn't. Stealth over force. Precision over chaos. But tonight something felt different from the moment she crossed the perimeter fence. The first sign of trouble came when she noticed the security cameras. They were too new, too well positioned for an abandoned facility. The second warning was the fresh tire tracks in the mud, multiple vehicles that had been here recently. By the time she realized she was being watched, it was already too late to retreat. Sarah had made it halfway across the main warehouse floor when the floodlights blazed to life. Dozens of armed men emerged from concealed positions, assault rifles trained on her from every direction. In the center of the trap stood Viktor Kozlov, a man she recognized from intelligence files. Russian military background, now running one of the largest criminal enterprises in the region. Lieutenant Sarah Chen. Viktor's accented voice echoed through the vast space. Former Delta Force, current freelance justice warrior. You've been causing us quite a bit of trouble. Sarah kept her hands visible but ready. Her sidearm was holstered, and she had various other tools concealed on her person. But 40 guns pointed at her from different angles made any immediate action suicide. She needed to assess, adapt, and find an opportunity. I don't suppose you'd consider this a misunderstanding and let me walk away, she asked, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Viktor laughed, a sound devoid of humor. You've cost us millions of dollars in disrupted operations. Did you really think we wouldn't eventually track you down? Your little crusade ends tonight. The criminal leader gestured to his men, who began to close in slowly. Sarah noticed their discipline, their coordination. These weren't street thugs or desperate criminals. They moved like soldiers, which meant Viktor had been recruiting from military backgrounds. That made them dangerous, but it also meant they might underestimate her capabilities. You know, Sarah said conversationally, I've been in worse situations than this. Have you now? Viktor stepped closer, confident in his overwhelming advantage. Surrounded by 40 armed professionals in an isolated location with no backup coming? I find that hard to believe. Sarah's mind was already working through possibilities. The warehouse had multiple levels, catwalks, and industrial equipment that could provide cover. More importantly, she had noticed several details about the building's layout during her initial reconnaissance. Emergency exits, structural weak points, and the facility's old fire suppression system. The thing about being a special operator, Sarah continued, still speaking in that calm, almost casual tone, is that we're trained for scenarios that regular soldiers never imagine. Situations where the odds are impossible, where conventional tactics fail, where you have to think beyond normal parameters. Viktor's expression shifted slightly. Something in her demeanor was unsettling him, though he couldn't put his finger on what exactly. She wasn't displaying the fear or desperation he expected from someone in her position. You're bluffing, he declared, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice now. Sarah smiled, and for the first time since the lights came on, she looked genuinely relaxed. Marcus sends his regards, by the way. The confusion that crossed Viktor's face was exactly what she had been waiting for. In that split second of distraction as he tried to process her words and their implications, Sarah moved, but she didn't reach for a weapon or attempt to fight her way out. Instead, she did something completely unexpected. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out what appeared to be a small electronic device. Before anyone could react, she pressed a button. Nothing happened. No explosion, no alarm, no dramatic effect. The device simply beeped once, a soft sound barely audible in the vast warehouse. Viktor's men looked confused, unsure whether to shoot or wait for orders. The criminal leader himself was staring at the device, trying to understand what game she was playing. What was that supposed to accomplish? Victor demanded. Sarah's smile widened. You'll find out soon enough. But first I should probably mention that Marcus was never my informant. He's been working for you all along, feeding information back to your organization. The thing is, I knew that. I've known for weeks. The implications of her words began to sink in around the room. If she had known Marcus was compromised, then everything about tonight was intentional. She had walked into this trap deliberately. Which means, Sarah continued, her voice now carrying a different tone entirely. This isn't me being captured. This is me capturing all of you. Victor's face went pale as he began to understand. The warehouse, the isolation, the fact that she had drawn his entire operation into one location, the small device she had activated. His mind raced through the possibilities. None of them good. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but now it seemed less like random weather and more like nature itself, holding its breath for what was about to unfold. Sarah Chen stood in the center of 40 armed criminals, completely outnumbered and apparently helpless. But appearances, as Victor was beginning to realize, could be very deceiving when dealing with someone who had spent years learning how to turn impossible situations to her advantage. The real operation was just beginning. Victor's hands trembled slightly as he processed Sarah's revelation. The confidence that had carried him through decades of criminal enterprise was cracking like ice under pressure. Around him, his men shifted nervously, their weapons still trained on the woman who somehow seemed to have turned from prey into predator without moving a muscle. You're lying, Victor said, but his voice lacked conviction. This is some kind of psychological manipulation, a desperate bluff. Sarah checked her watch casually as if she had somewhere else to be. The device I just activated sent a signal to my backup team. They've been positioned around this facility for the past 2 hours. By now they've disabled your perimeter guards and are moving into position. A cold realization washed over Victor. He grabbed his radio and barked orders to his external security team. Static answered him. He tried different frequencies, different call signs. Nothing but empty air and the occasional burst of white noise. Impossible, he whispered. I have 20 men outside this building. Had, Sarah corrected gently. You had 20 men outside. Now you have whatever's left of them zip-tied in the back of a van, wondering how their night went so wrong so quickly. One of Victor's lieutenants, a scarred man named Dmitri, stepped forward. Boss, maybe we should just kill her now and get out of here. Sarah's expression didn't change, but her voice carried a warning edge. I wouldn't recommend that course of action, Dmitri. Yes, I know who you are. Former Spetsnaz. Discharged for excessive brutality even by their standards. The thing is, killing me would be the worst mistake you could possibly make right now. Victor was rapidly calculating options, but each path seemed to lead to disaster. Why? What happens if you die? Remember that signal I sent? It wasn't just to alert my team. It was also a dead man's switch. If my heart stops beating or if I don't check in every 15 minutes, some very interesting information gets uploaded to servers around the world. Financial records, shipping manifests, client lists, safe house locations, everything I've gathered about your organization over the past 3 months. The warehouse fell silent except for the rain drumming against the roof. Victor's empire had taken him 15 years to build, and the thought of it all being destroyed in a single night was paralyzing. You could be bluffing about the dead man's switch, Victor said, but he was grasping at straws now. Sarah shrugged. Feel free to test that theory, but ask yourself this. How did I know about tonight's meeting? How did I know exactly where to position myself to get captured by your entire inner circle? How did I know about the warehouse layout, your security protocols, even which of your men have military backgrounds? Victor's mind was reeling. Every aspect of what he had thought was his perfect trap was revealing itself to be orchestrated by his supposed victim. Marcus has been feeding you information I wanted you to have for weeks. Every intelligence leak about my activities, every piece of surveillance data about my movements, every detail about my supposed vulnerabilities. All carefully crafted to bring you here tonight with your key personnel. The criminal leader's face was now ashen. What do you want? Justice, Sarah replied simply, but not the kind that comes from a courtroom. You've corrupted too many officials, bought too many judges. The legal system can't touch you, but that doesn't mean you're untouchable. Dmitri was growing agitated. Boss, this is insane. She's one woman. We can end this right now. Sarah turned her attention to the lieutenant, and something in her gaze made him take an involuntary step backward. Dmitri, you're thinking like a conventional soldier. Overwhelming force, direct confrontation, simple solutions. But you're not dealing with a conventional situation anymore. She began walking slowly around the perimeter of the circle formed by Victor's men, her movements deliberate and unhurried. Remarkably, none of them stopped her. Something about her confidence was having a psychological effect on the entire group. Special operations taught me that the most effective weapon isn't always the one you carry, Sarah continued. Sometimes it's information. Sometimes it's timing. Sometimes it's understanding your enemy better than they understand themselves. Victor found his voice again, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. What kind of information? Sarah smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. Well, for starters, I know about the shipping container that's supposed to arrive at Pier 47 tomorrow morning. 12 girls, ages 14 to 19, from villages in Cambodia. I know about the auction house in Macau where they're destined to be sold. I know about your clients in Singapore, Hong Kong, and Dubai who have already placed bids. The specificity of her knowledge hit Victor like a physical blow. That shipment was known only to his most trusted associates, and the auction details were supposed to be completely secure. I also know about your backup facilities in Laos and Myanmar, Sarah continued, the ones you think are completely off the radar. The safe houses in Bangkok where you hold girls while you arrange transportation. The corrupt officials in 3 different countries who facilitate your operations. Victor's legs felt weak. She wasn't just talking about his current operations. She was describing his entire network with surgical precision. But here's what really should concern you, Sarah said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I know about your daughter. The effect was instantaneous. Victor's face went from pale to white, and his hands began shaking visibly. Anna has nothing to do with this. She doesn't even know what I do. Anna Kozlova, 23 years old, studying international relations at Cambridge University, lives in a flat on Trumpington Street, takes the bus to campus every morning at 8:15, has coffee at the same cafe every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. Victor's weapon was in his hand now, pointed directly at Sarah's head. If you hurt my daughter, I will make you suffer in ways you cannot imagine. Sarah's expression softened slightly, showing something that might have been sympathy. Victor, I'm not going to hurt your daughter. I'm not a monster, but the fact that you immediately thought about her safety when I mentioned her name tells me everything I need to know about what really matters to you. The warehouse was thick with tension now. Every man present could feel that they were at a tipping point, where one wrong word or movement could trigger a catastrophe. So here's what's going to happen, Sarah announced, her voice carrying clearly through the space. In about 3 minutes, my backup team is going to make their presence known. You'll have a choice to make. Surrender peacefully and face whatever justice awaits you, or resist and face the consequences of fighting people who are very, very good at what they do. Victor's mind was spinning through possibilities, but every scenario seemed to end in disaster. You said you wanted justice, not legal proceedings. What kind of justice? Sarah's smile returned, but this time it carried genuine warmth. The kind where those girls get to go home to their families instead of being sold to the highest bidder. The kind where your network gets dismantled piece by piece. The kind where monsters like you learn that there are still people in the world willing to fight for what's right. Outside, the first sounds of approaching vehicles could be heard over the rain. The sound of engines grew louder as vehicles surrounded the warehouse. Victor's men looked toward the windows nervously, but the rain and darkness made it impossible to see how many people were outside. Sarah remained perfectly calm, checking her watch again with the casual air of someone waiting for a scheduled appointment. 2 minutes ahead of schedule, she murmured approvingly. I trained them well. Victor's grip tightened on his weapon. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air in the warehouse. How many people are out there? Enough, Sarah replied simply. But here's something interesting about special operations that most people don't understand. It's not always about having more people or bigger guns. It's about having the right people in the right positions with the right information. A new voice crackled through hidden speakers placed around the warehouse, causing several of Victor's men to jump. The voice was calm, professional, with a slight American accent. This is Colonel James Mitchell, United States Special Forces. The building is surrounded. All exits are secured. We have visual confirmation of all personnel inside the structure. Victor spun around, trying to locate the speakers, but they seemed to be embedded in the warehouse's infrastructure. Impossible. This is sovereign territory. American military has no jurisdiction here. Sarah tilted her head thoughtfully. Well, that's technically true, but Colonel Mitchell isn't here in an official capacity. None of us are, really. Think of this as a private consulting operation. The radio in Victor's hand suddenly crackled to life. Not his radio. Somehow Sarah's people had accessed his frequency. Mr. Kozlov, this is Mitchell. I'm told you're a reasonable man when your back isn't against the wall. Why don't we discuss this situation like adults? Victor looked around wildly. His 40 men were becoming increasingly agitated. Some were backing toward what they hoped were exits. Others were arguing in whispers about whether to open fire or surrender. The psychological pressure Sarah had initiated was spreading through his organization like a virus. I want to speak to whoever's in charge out there. Victor shouted toward the ceiling. You're speaking to him, came Mitchell's reply. And right now I'm offering you a one-time opportunity to resolve this without unnecessary bloodshed. Sarah stepped forward slightly, still completely relaxed despite being at the center of an armed standoff. Victor, let me explain something about the people outside. They're not here for money or glory or patriotic duty. They're here because they've seen what your organization does to innocent people. They've seen the photos of girls who disappeared into your network. They've read the files on families destroyed by your business. Her voice grew harder, more intense. Every person out there volunteered for this mission after seeing evidence of your crimes. They're not just soldiers following orders. They're human beings who decided that someone needed to stop you. Dmitri was losing his composure. Boss, this is a trap within a trap. We need to fight our way out now before they get set up. They're already set up, Sarah pointed out calmly. They have been for hours. While you were celebrating what you thought was my capture, they were studying this building, identifying structural weaknesses, planning entry routes, and positioning themselves for maximum effectiveness. Victor's tactical mind was trying to process the situation, but every angle seemed hopeless. What guarantee do I have that surrendering won't just mean dying in custody instead of dying here? Mitchell's voice came through the speakers again. Mr. Kozlov, I'm going to be completely honest with you. If this turns into a firefight, most of your people won't survive it. We've identified 43 individuals inside the warehouse, including yourself. We have enough firepower positioned around this building to level it completely if necessary. Sarah nodded toward one of the windows. But Colonel Mitchell is also a professional who prefers to accomplish objectives with minimal casualties when possible. Surrender means you live to face trial. Resistance means you probably don't live at all. One of Victor's younger men, barely out of his teens, lowered his weapon slightly. Boss, maybe we should listen to them. Shut up, Pavel, Dmitri snarled. We don't negotiate with enemies. Sarah turned her attention to Pavel, her expression softening. Pavel Nestorov, 19 years old, recruited 6 months ago. Your mother thinks you're working construction in Bangkok. She sends money every month because she's proud of how hard you're working to support yourself. Pavel's face went white. The specific details about his personal life, delivered with such casual accuracy, broke something in his resolve. Your mother's name is Elena. Sarah continued gently. She lives in a small apartment in Volgograd and works at a textile factory. She's very proud of her son who moved to Thailand for better opportunities. The young man's weapon clattered to the floor as his hands began shaking. How do you know about my mother? Because I know about all of you, Sarah replied. Pavel, you can walk out of here tonight and go home to your mother. You can tell her the truth about what you've been doing and ask for her forgiveness. Or you can die in this warehouse defending something that isn't worth defending. Victor watched as doubt spread through his organization. Sarah wasn't just attacking him personally. She was systematically dismantling the loyalty and cohesion that held his criminal empire together. This is psychological warfare, Victor muttered. Yes, it is, Sarah agreed readily, and it's very effective when you're fighting people who aren't completely committed to evil. Most of your men aren't monsters, Victor. They're just people who made bad choices because they needed money or power or belonging. Mitchell's voice returned through the speakers. We're going to give you 5 minutes to make a decision. After that, we come in and take what we want. The difference is how many people get hurt in the process. Sarah walked over to a stack of shipping crates and sat down casually, as if settling in to watch an interesting show. Victor, can I share something with you about leadership? Despite everything, Victor found himself listening. There was something hypnotic about her confidence, the way she maintained control of a situation where she should have had no power at all. Real leadership isn't about making people follow you through fear or greed, Sarah continued. It's about giving them something worth believing in. Look around this room. How many of these men would still follow you if they had better options? How many are here because they genuinely respect you, versus how many are here because they're afraid or desperate? Victor's gaze swept across his assembled men. He could see doubt in their faces, fear in their postures. Young Pavel was openly crying now. Several others were whispering among themselves, glancing toward the exits. Even if we somehow got out of this situation, Sarah pressed on, your organization is finished. Too many people know too much. Your network is compromised at every level. Your safe houses are blown. Your financial accounts are being traced. Your clients are being identified. She stood up from the crates and took a step toward Victor. Remarkably, none of his men moved to stop her. The only question now is whether you want to spend whatever time you have left as a free man running from shadows, or if you want to do one decent thing before your story ends. Victor's hand was shaking as he held his weapon. What kind of decent thing? Sarah's expression became deadly serious. Help us save those girls. Tell us where they are, how to get them out safely, and how to return them to their families. Give us the information we need to shut down every aspect of your operation permanently. The warehouse fell silent except for the rain and the distant sound of engines idling outside. 43 lives hung in the balance, waiting for one man's decision. Victor stared at his weapon for a long moment, then slowly lowered it. The gesture sent ripples of relief through the warehouse as his men recognized that their leader was no longer planning to fight. Sarah nodded approvingly, though she remained alert to any sudden changes in the situation. Smart choice, she said quietly. Now let's talk about those girls. Victor's shoulders sagged as the weight of his situation fully settled on him. 15 years of building a criminal empire, and it was all crumbling in a single night because he had underestimated one woman. The container is in a secure warehouse at Pier 47, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. They're scheduled to be moved tomorrow night to a private airfield outside the city. Sarah pulled out a small recording device, setting it on the crates beside her. I'm going to need more details than that. Security protocols, guard rotations, transport arrangements, everything. Mitchell's voice came through the speakers again. We're monitoring police frequencies. Local authorities haven't been alerted to any situation here yet, but that could change. Whatever you're doing in there, I recommend moving quickly. Victor looked around at his men, many of whom were now sitting on the floor with their weapons abandoned. The warehouse has 8 guards during night shift. 2 at the main entrance, 2 patrolling the perimeter, 4 inside the building. They change shifts at midnight and 6 a.m. What about the container itself? Sarah pressed. How is it secured? Electronic lock combination changes daily. Only 3 people know the current code. Myself, Dimitri, and my operations manager, Chen Wei. Dimitri stepped forward angrily. Boss, what are you doing? You can't trust these people. They're going to arrest all of us anyway. Sarah turned to face the lieutenant. Dimitri, you have 2 choices. You can help us save those girls and maybe get some consideration for cooperation, or you can keep quiet and spend the rest of your life in a very unpleasant prison. Your choice. I'm not afraid of prison, Dimitri snarled. You should be, Sarah replied calmly, especially when word gets out about what you've been doing to young girls. Prisoners have their own justice system for people like you. The threat hit its mark. Dimitri's bravado cracked and fear flickered in his eyes. He had seen enough of the criminal justice system to know that child traffickers didn't fare well in general population. Victor continued providing information, his voice growing stronger as he talked. Perhaps there was some relief in finally confessing, or maybe he was simply resigned to his fate. The girls are kept in the container during transport, but when they're stationary, they're moved to a climate-controlled room in the warehouse. Better conditions mean better health, which means higher prices. How many guards in the room with them? Sarah asked. Usually 2. They work 12-hour shifts. Sarah was building a mental map of the facility, calculating timing and resources needed for a successful rescue operation. What about medical care? Are any of the girls injured or sick? Victor's expression grew uncomfortable. Some are unwell. The transport conditions aren't ideal. We have a doctor who visits twice weekly to ensure they remain marketable. The clinical way he discussed human suffering made Sarah's jaw clench, but she maintained her professional demeanor. This wasn't the time for moral outrage. It was the time for effective action. I need the warehouse layout, she said. Blueprint level detail. Victor gestured to one of his men. Alexei has the security plans on his tablet. He handles facility management. A thin man with nervous eyes stepped forward holding a tablet computer. The warehouse is divided into 3 sections. Storage in the front, administrative offices in the middle, and the special holding area in the back. Sarah examined the digital blueprints, noting entry points, camera positions, and structural details. These security cameras, are they monitored remotely or just recorded locally? Monitored from the office, Alexei replied, but only during business hours. Night shift just reviews recordings if there's an incident. Good, Sarah murmured, already formulating a plan. What about the transport tomorrow? Vehicle, route, destination? Victor was now fully cooperating, perhaps hoping that his assistance might somehow mitigate his eventual punishment. Armored truck, 3 guards plus driver. They take the coast road to avoid traffic cameras. Destination is a private airfield in Rayong province. And after that, cargo plane to Macau. The auction house there has buyers from across Asia. Sarah's recording device captured every detail. This information would be crucial not just for tonight's rescue operation, but for dismantling the entire trafficking network. Each piece of intelligence opened new possibilities for saving other victims and preventing future crimes. Mitchell's voice interrupted through the speakers. We have movement on police frequencies. Someone may have reported the vehicles outside. We need to accelerate our timeline. Sarah stood up, pocketing the recording device. Victor, I need you to call the warehouse and tell them you're coming for an inspection tonight. Something about concerns over security. Make it sound routine. They'll be suspicious if I show up unexpectedly. Then make it convincing, Sarah replied firmly. Because if this rescue fails because you couldn't sell a simple lie, those girls suffer for your inadequacy. Victor pulled out his phone with shaking hands. The warehouse manager answered on the 3rd ring, and Victor launched into a performance about irregularities in the security reports and his need to personally verify protocols. His voice grew steadier as he talked, falling back into the authoritative tone he had used to run his organization for years. When he ended the call, Sarah nodded approvingly. Not bad. You almost sounded like you believed it yourself. Now what? Victor asked. Now you're going to help us get inside that warehouse without anyone getting hurt. You, me, and a small team are going to walk in there like we own the place, secure those girls, and walk out again. Dmitri laughed bitterly. You're insane. The moment those guards see strangers with the boss, they'll know something's wrong. Sarah smiled, and for the first time all evening it looked genuinely pleased. Dmitri, you're thinking like someone who's never run a deep cover operation. The key to successful infiltration isn't avoiding suspicion, it's managing it. She turned back to Victor. You're going to introduce me as a potential buyer, someone important enough that you'd personally escort her for a private viewing. Your men are my security detail. They'll never believe that. They'll believe it because you'll make them believe it. Because you're very good at convincing people to go along with things they shouldn't. And tonight that particular skill is going to serve a noble purpose for once in your life. Mitchell's voice crackled through the speakers again. Police vehicles are en route to this location. We have maybe 10 minutes before this place is crawling with local law enforcement. Sarah walked toward the warehouse entrance, gesturing for Victor to follow. Then we better get moving. Time to find out if a special operator can pull off the greatest con job of her career. As they moved toward the exit, she called back to the remaining men. Anyone who tries to run or cause problems will be hunted down and brought to justice. Anyone who cooperates and helps us save those girls might just get a second chance at building a life worth living. The warehouse doors opened to reveal a circle of military vehicles and armed personnel. Sarah stepped out into the rain with complete confidence, as if leading a criminal conspiracy was just another day at the office. The rain had intensified by the time Sarah and Victor reached the second warehouse. Colonel Mitchell's team had provided them with a black SUV and 2 operators posing as security personnel. To any observer, it would look like a wealthy criminal conducting late-night business with appropriate protection. Sarah had transformed her appearance during the short drive. Gone was the tactical gear and military bearing. In its place was an expensive business suit, designer accessories, and the cold demeanor of someone accustomed to buying and selling human lives. The transformation was so complete that even Victor found himself slightly unnerved by her performance. Remember, Sarah murmured as they approached the warehouse entrance. I'm Mei Lin, a buyer from Hong Kong. I'm considering a significant purchase, which is why you're personally handling this showing. Keep it simple, stay in character, and let me do most of the talking. Victor nodded, wiping sweat from his palms. Despite years of criminal activity, he had never attempted anything quite like this. The stakes were different when success meant saving lives rather than destroying them. The warehouse guards recognized Victor immediately and buzzed them through the main entrance. Sarah noted the security cameras, the positions of the guards, and the general layout as they walked through the facility. Everything matched the blueprints Alexei had provided, which was reassuring for the rescue operation that would follow. Mr. Kozlov, the night manager, greeted them nervously. We weren't expecting you tonight. Victor slipped into his role smoothly. Ms. Malin is considering a substantial investment in our operation. She requested a private viewing of the current inventory before making her decision. The manager, a nervous man named Thompson, looked uncertain. Sir, the merchandise is scheduled for transport tomorrow. Perhaps we could arrange a viewing next week when the new shipment arrives. Sarah stepped forward, her voice carrying the imperious tone of someone unaccustomed to being denied. Mr. Thompson, is it? I'm flying back to Hong Kong tomorrow morning. This is my only opportunity to inspect your facilities personally. Are you telling me that your organization is too disorganized to accommodate a serious buyer? The implied threat in her voice was unmistakable. Thompson immediately began apologizing and assuring her that of course they could arrange a viewing. Within minutes, he was personally escorting them toward the back section of the warehouse where the girls were being held. As they walked, Sarah's trained eyes cataloged every detail that might be relevant for the rescue team. Guard positions, camera angles, escape routes, potential obstacles. She also noted the general condition of the facility. Clean, well-organized, efficiently run. Victor's operation was unfortunately professional in its approach to human misery. The holding area was accessed through a series of security doors, each requiring electronic keycards. Thompson swiped them through confidently, maintaining a stream of nervous chatter about the quality of their current inventory and the care they took in handling merchandise. We maintain strict health protocols, he explained as they approached the final door. Regular medical checkups, proper nutrition, climate control. Our clients expect quality and we deliver quality. Sarah's stomach churned at the clinical way he discussed human beings, but she maintained her cold expression. Excellent. Quality control is essential in any successful operation. The final door opened to reveal a large room divided into smaller sections by chain-link partitions. In each section were young women, ranging from what appeared to be mid-teens to early 20s. They looked up fearfully as the group entered, clearly recognizing Victor and understanding that his presence meant their situation was about to change. Sarah's professional training took over, suppressing her emotional response to the scene. She could deal with her feelings later. Right now, she needed to count the victims, assess their condition, and identify any immediate medical concerns that would complicate the rescue. 12 girls total, Thompson was saying proudly. All from rural areas, minimal family connections to complicate retrieval. Ages 14 to 21, various ethnic backgrounds to appeal to different market preferences. Their physical condition? Sarah asked, walking slowly along the partitions. Excellent. Dr. Patel examined them yesterday and cleared them all for transport. A few minor ailments, but nothing that affects marketability. Sarah noticed one girl who appeared significantly younger than the others, maybe 13 or 14. She was curled in a corner, clearly terrified and possibly ill. That one looks unwell. Thompson followed her gaze. Ah, yes. She's been somewhat difficult to manage. Refuses to eat regularly. Doesn't respond to encouragement. Some buyers prefer the more spirited ones, but she may require additional conditioning. Victor shifted uncomfortably beside her. Even for him, Thompson's casual cruelty was disturbing. Sarah sensed his discomfort and decided to use it. Perhaps we should discuss pricing, she said, turning away from the cages. Mr. Kozlov mentioned you might be willing to negotiate for a bulk purchase. Thompson's eyes lit up with greed. Certainly. For a buyer of your caliber, I'm sure we can work out very favorable terms. As they moved toward the office area to discuss fictional transactions, Sarah discreetly activated a small transmitter hidden in her jewelry. The signal would alert Mitchell's team that they had located the victims and were ready for the next phase of the operation. The office was Spartanly, furnished but equipped with multiple monitors showing feeds from security cameras throughout the facility. Sarah noted the positions of all guards and confirmed that the layout matched their intelligence. 2 guards remained in the holding area, 2 more patrolled the warehouse floor, and Thompson had mentioned additional security at the main entrance. "Now then," Thompson said, settling behind his desk with obvious pleasure, "what kind of numbers were you thinking for a complete purchase?" Sarah pretended to consider carefully, while actually calculating the timing for the rescue operation. "The entire current inventory, plus I'd be interested in establishing an ongoing relationship for future shipments." Victor played his part well, nodding approvingly. "Ms. Mei Lin represents some very substantial clients in Hong Kong and Macau. This could be quite profitable for our organization." Thompson was practically salivating at the prospect. "Excellent. For the current 12 girls, considering their quality and the bulk nature of the purchase, I could offer them for 800,000 American dollars. Sarah managed to look appropriately interested rather than disgusted. "That seems reasonable. However, I'll need to inspect them more thoroughly before finalizing any agreement. Perhaps we could have them brought to a more suitable viewing area." "Of course. We have a presentation room that's much more comfortable for serious buyers." This was exactly what Sarah had hoped for. Moving the girls to a different location would simplify the rescue operation by consolidating them in a single area with fewer guards. "Wonderful," she replied. "While you're arranging that, I'd like to review your transport and security procedures. My clients are very particular about discretion." Thompson began explaining their protocols in detail, completely unaware that every word was being recorded by Sarah's concealed devices. The information would be invaluable for dismantling other parts of the trafficking network. 20 minutes later, as Thompson supervised the movement of the girls to the presentation room, Sarah received a subtle signal from one of Mitchell's operators posing as her security. The rescue team was in position around the building. The presentation room was on the ground floor with large windows facing the parking area, perfect for the assault team's entry. Sarah positioned herself near the girls while continuing to play her role as a buyer. Victor remained near the door, growing increasingly nervous as he realized how close they were to the moment of truth. "Now then," Thompson said, gesturing proudly at the terrified young women, "as you can see, we maintain very high standards. Each girl has been medically cleared and properly prepared for transport." Sarah walked among them, making a show of inspection while actually offering quiet reassurance in multiple languages. Several of the girls seemed to recognize that something was different about this buyer, though they couldn't identify what exactly. "They seem somewhat subdued," Sarah observed. "Are they medicated?" "Light sedation only," Thompson assured her. "Nothing that affects their long-term value. Just enough to keep them manageable during viewing and transport." Sarah checked her watch. According to the plan, Mitchell's team would move in exactly 3 minutes. She needed to position herself to protect the girls when the action started. "I'm quite impressed with your operation," she told Thompson. "However, I do have one concern about security. What would happen if law enforcement somehow located this facility?" Thompson laughed confidently. "Impossible. We have contacts in local law enforcement who alert us to any investigations. Plus, this facility isn't connected to any of our other operations. Even if someone discovered it, they couldn't trace it back to the larger organization." "Interesting," Sarah murmured, moving closer to the windows. "And what about federal or international law enforcement?" "They have no jurisdiction here," Thompson replied dismissively. "Local corruption is very effective at preventing outside interference." Sarah smiled coldly. "You might be surprised what international law enforcement can accomplish when they're properly motivated." Something in her tone made Thompson look at her more carefully for the first time. The expression on her face was no longer that of a potential buyer. It was something far more dangerous. "Who are you?" he asked, his hand moving toward a panic button on his desk. Sarah's voice dropped its fake accent and returned to its natural authority. "I'm someone who's been looking for you for a very long time, Thompson, and your time just ran out." Before Thompson could reach the panic button, the windows exploded inward as Mitchell's assault team made their entry. Flashbang grenades disoriented the guards while heavily armed operators swarmed into the room with military precision. "Everyone on the ground, now!" Mitchell's voice boomed over the chaos. Sarah immediately moved to shield the girls, speaking to them in calming tones while the Special Forces team secured the area. Victor raised his hands in surrender, while Thompson was tackled to the floor before he could destroy any evidence. Within 90 seconds, the room was completely under control. The guards were zip-tied and secured. Thompson was in custody, and medical personnel were beginning to examine the rescued girls. Sarah knelt beside the youngest victim, the girl who had been huddled in the corner earlier. "It's over," she said gently in what she hoped was the girl's native language. "You're safe now. We're going to take you home." The girl looked up at her with eyes that had seen too much suffering for someone so young. But for the first time in months, there was a glimmer of hope in her expression. Colonel Mitchell approached Sarah as his team continued securing the facility. "Outstanding work," he said quietly. "That was some of the best undercover work I've ever seen." Sarah stood up, her attention already turning to the next phase of the operation. "The rescue was the easy part, Colonel. Now we have to make sure these girls get home safely, and that the people responsible for this never hurt anyone again." Victor was led past them in handcuffs, but he paused to speak to Sarah. "Thank you," he said simply, "for giving me the chance to do something right." Sarah nodded acknowledgement but didn't reply. Some roads to redemption were longer than others, and Victor's journey was just beginning. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in a small village outside Phnom Penh, watching as 15-year-old Sranich ran into her mother's arms. The reunion was everything Sarah had hoped for when she first began tracking Victor's organization: pure joy, desperate relief, and the kind of love that could survive even the darkest circumstances. The girl's mother wept as she held her daughter, speaking rapidly in Khmer while touching her face as if to confirm she was real. Sranich was the third girl Sarah had personally escorted home, and each reunion reminded her why she had chosen this difficult path. "She's the last one from the warehouse rescue," Colonel Mitchell said, joining Sarah on the porch of the village community center. "The other 9 are all back with their families. The medical team says they're healing well physically and psychologically." Sarah nodded, though her expression remained thoughtful. "And the network?" "Completely dismantled. Victor's information led us to facilities in 4 countries. We've rescued over 60 additional victims and arrested more than 200 people involved in the operation. It was a significant victory. But Sarah had been in this work long enough to know that shutting down one network didn't end the larger problem. "How many other organizations are still operating?" Mitchell's expression grew serious. "Too many. But what we accomplished here will send a message. Word is already spreading through criminal circles about what happened to Victor's empire. Some smaller operations are shutting down voluntarily rather than risk similar attention." Sarah turned away from the reunion to face Mitchell directly. "That's not enough, Colonel. We disrupted one network, saved some lives, but the demand still exists. The corruption that makes this possible is still in place. In 6 months, someone else will try to fill the vacuum Victor left behind. So what do you propose?" Sarah had been thinking about this question ever since the warehouse raid. "We need to change our approach. Instead of just reacting to trafficking networks after they're established, we need to prevent them from forming in the first place." Mitchell raised an eyebrow. "Prevention sounds like a job for governments and international organizations, not special operations teams." "Maybe," Sarah conceded. "But governments move slowly, and international organizations get bogged down in bureaucracy. Meanwhile, more girls disappear every day." She gestured toward Sranich, who was now surrounded by her extended family and neighbors. "What if we created something different? An organization that combined the speed and effectiveness of special operations with the resources and reach of a larger institution?" Mitchell was quiet for a moment, considering the implications. "You're talking about a completely new kind of anti-trafficking operation." "I'm talking about evolution," Sarah replied. "We've proven that small, highly trained teams can accomplish things that larger organizations can't. But we've also seen the limitations of working alone or in isolation." From inside the community center came the sound of celebration as the village welcomed home one of their own. Sarah listened to the joy in their voices and felt both satisfaction and determination. "Victor's cooperation has given us intelligence on trafficking operations across Southeast Asia," she continued. "But information is only valuable if someone acts on it effectively." Mitchell nodded slowly. "And you think we could build something that systematically targets these networks?" "Not just targets them," Sarah said. "Prevents them, disrupts them, rescues victims, and ensures the criminals face justice. A comprehensive approach that addresses every aspect of the problem." The idea had been forming in Sarah's mind for weeks, but speaking it aloud made it feel more real. more possible. She could envision teams of specialists working across multiple countries, sharing intelligence, coordinating operations, and providing support to victims. It would require significant resources, Mitchell pointed out, and cooperation from multiple governments. Victor's seized assets alone would fund operations for years, Sarah replied. And I think we'd be surprised how many governments would cooperate with an organization that produces results like ours. Mitchell was warming to the concept. We'd need people with specialized skills, intelligence analysts, undercover operatives, rescue specialists, victim support counselors. And we'd need them in multiple countries, Sarah added. This is a global problem that requires a global response. As they talked, Sarah noticed a young man approaching them hesitantly. He was well-dressed but nervous, clearly wanting to speak but uncertain about interrupting their conversation. "Excuse me," he said in accented English. "Are you the American who saved my sister?" Sarah turned to face him fully. "What's your sister's name?" "Srinich. She was taken 6 months ago from our village. We thought we would never see her again." Sarah's expression softened. "Your sister is very brave. She helped us understand how to better support the other girls during their recovery." The young man's eyes filled with tears. "My family wants to thank you, but we don't know how. We have nothing to give someone who returned our daughter to us." "You don't need to give me anything," Sarah replied gently. "But if you want to help, tell other families in your village about what happened. Help them understand the signs of trafficking recruiters. Make sure your community knows how to protect their children." He nodded eagerly. Yes, we will do this. The village elder wants to create a protection program so this never happens again to any family here." After he left to rejoin the celebration, Mitchell looked at Sarah with newfound understanding. "You're not just talking about rescuing victims, are you? You're talking about empowering communities to protect themselves." "Exactly," Sarah confirmed. "Special operations can handle the dangerous work, but lasting change has to come from the ground up. Communities that know how to recognize threats, governments that prioritize prosecution, businesses that don't turn a blind eye to suspicious activities." Mitchell was quiet for several minutes, watching the celebration and processing Sarah's vision. Finally, he spoke.
"What would you call this organization?"
Sarah smiled for the first time in weeks. "I was thinking about that. Something that reflects our mission and our methods." "And the Guardian Network," she said simply. "Because that's what we'd be. Guardians standing between predators and the innocent people they target." Mitchell extended his hand. "Colonel Sarah Chen, I think you just outlined the future of anti-trafficking operations." Sarah shook his hand firmly. "Then let's build it, Colonel. Starting tomorrow." As the sun set over the Cambodian village, Sarah watched Srinich laughing with her younger cousins, playing the same games she had played before her nightmare began. The girl still had a long journey ahead. Healing from trauma wasn't something that happened overnight, but she was home. She was safe and she had a future again. More importantly, she would never be alone in that journey. The Guardian Network would make sure of that. Sarah pulled out her satellite phone and began making calls. There were people in a dozen countries who needed to hear about this new vision, funding sources that needed to be contacted, and logistics that needed to be arranged. The war against human trafficking was far from over, but tonight it had gained something it had never had before: a comprehensive, coordinated global response led by people who understood that some fights were worth dedicating your life to. As Sarah talked quietly into her phone, organizing the foundation of something that could change countless lives, she could hear Srinich's laughter in the background. It was the sound of hope, the sound of victory, and the sound of a future where fewer families would have to endure the nightmare of losing a child to trafficking. The special operator had completed her mission, but the Guardian was just getting started.